Okay, welcome everybody to a new season of Squash Canada's Coach PD webinar series. We're really thrilled to have the season get started with these webinars, and to start the season off with a bang, we've got a great three-part webinar series on nutrition that starts with part one today on fundamentals of performance nutrition. Our presenter is Kenzie Osborne, and she's going to give you a little background on herself in a minute, but just a couple of kind of housekeeping rules. Certainly if you can keep your mics off and your webcams muted just throughout the presentation, unless you're asking a question, that would be great. For coaches, again, I just need to know who you are. So if you haven't changed your name, that would be appreciated. So I have an identifier of who you are for credit for the webinar. Other than that, we're going to turn it over to Kenzie for a presentation, and then she'll get into the nitty-gritty stuff, and then we'll circle back at the end for a recap. Take it away, Kenzie.
Okay, thank you so much. Thanks for having me today. So my name is Kenzie Osborne. I am a natural nutrition clinical practitioner, as well as a performance nutritionist and a recipe developer. So over the past few years, since I graduated from my culinary nutrition program, I have been developing recipes for Team Canada Olympic athletes, for some squash players, so Nicole Bunyan and Sam Cornett as well, and other athletes, other high performance athletes, both young athletes and older athletes. So my specialty is really in helping people to better understand nutrition concepts and also implement them in practical ways in their lifestyle. So I know as an athlete myself, I was an NCAA tennis player. So as an athlete myself, I do understand the different challenges that come into play when we're talking about athletic nutrition. My three brothers as well were all high performance squash players. So I am very familiar with all the needs and demands of squash players as well. So I'm going to go right ahead and share my screen. Today, I am using a platform called Mentimeter. So using this platform, if you do have a phone that you're not using for this presentation, if you have a phone that is handy, you can go ahead into menti.com or just scan the QR code. And this is how we'll be able to make this a little bit interactive. So you'll be able to answer some questions, you'll be able to ask some questions. If you cannot do this, that's completely okay. You can, of course, engage and ask questions or answer questions in the Zoom chat, so I can see that as well. As we go through this presentation, if you have any questions that are relevant to what I'm talking about, please feel free to write them in the chat on Zoom, and I'll do my best to get to them. If you have a question that's not necessarily related to what I'm talking about at that time, that's okay. Just hold on to it, because at the end, I will have time for question and answer as well. Okay. So for the sake of time, I'm going to get going. I see a couple people have logged in on Menti. If not, you will always see the little bar at the top. So you can just go to menti.com and use that code as we go through. All right. So before we get started, I want to make sure that this presentation is as relevant to you as possible. So if you have any specific questions about nutrition for young athletes, please let me know now so that I can try to address them as we go through the presentation. And just a quick reminder to try to keep yourself on mute unless you are asking a question, just so there's no background noise as well. Thank you. All right, I'll give you a couple minutes if there are any questions right off the bat. Otherwise, I will get started.
Sorry, I'm trying to get into that site. Just couldn't get in there, menti.com.
Okay, if you try just going to www.menti.com, it should just ask you for a code that you can plug in. If you are having difficulties, everything can also be sent through the Zoom chat, so you can also interact in that way as well. best pre-competition snacks. Let's get into that. So I will hold on that, but I have a whole slide dedicated to pre-training. There is also going to be a specific webinar later in the series about pre-training snacks. Okay. All right, I'm going to get going. Again, if there are any questions as things pop up, please write them in the Zoom chat. If you don't feel comfortable with writing them in the group chat, just privately message me on Zoom as well, and I will be able to get to that. All right. So what we're going to be talking about today is, we're going to start out by talking about the breakdown of energy yielding nutrients. We'll talk a little bit about vitamins and minerals specifically to watch out for. We'll talk about practical strategies to put all of this into practice, simple tricks to improve nutrition, and an emphasis on eating environment as well, particularly for athletes to establish a positive and healthy relationship with food. So we're going to start out by talking about macros. So macros, or macronutrients, are nutrients that give our bodies energy. So vitamins and minerals, those are very important, but those do not actually provide our body with energy. They do not contain calories. Macronutrients, on the other hand, those are going to be our fat, carbohydrates, and proteins. Those do provide our body with energy that can actually be used in our body, okay? When you break these three macronutrients down, we can break them into how we use them, okay? So first is going to be carbohydrates. They are our first line of energy. They're what our body likes to use most in terms of quick energy source. So we can break them down fast, we can use them fast, and they do provide us with quick energy that we can use right away. Fats, on the other hand, they are our second line of energy. We store fat as stored energy that can later be converted into glucose or sugar, essentially, to be used as energy. They're a little bit harder to break down and use as energy, so we don't necessarily want to have them right before training. Those, again, are more of an energy storage. If you're in a squash match that lasts longer than an hour, even if it lasts longer than 45 minutes, you're likely going to start using fat as a source of energy because you will have run out of your first line of energy, which would be those carbohydrates. Proteins are a type of macronutrient that is primarily used for muscular repair and muscular growth. We don't really ever want to get to the point where we're using protein for energy. It can technically be used for energy, so it can be broken down into glucose, so a sugar, which then can be used as energy, but we don't want that to happen. In order for that to happen, we would have to break down proteins, so break down our muscles in order to get energy. That will only happen if we have run out of carbohydrates and we've run out of fats. So in all likelihood, we're not going to be using protein as energy. And again, we really don't want that to happen. Protein is building blocks, so we really want to be able to use that to build and repair our muscle mass. So there are two main types of carbohydrates. I like to simplify them into quick carbohydrates and slow carbohydrates. Quick carbohydrates are going to provide us with really fast energy. These are what we want before and after training. So before training, we want these quick carbohydrates to provide us with an easy to digest source of energy that's going to fuel our activity for the beginning of our match or of our training session. You're also going to want these quick carbohydrates after training. And the reason for that is after training, our muscles have torn a little bit. Okay, they've been stressed. And so we need to replenish our glycogen stores, which is a form of sugar in our body. We need to replenish those with new sugars that can be easy for our body to digest, easy for our body to use as quick as possible. This is why you'll see athletes eating bananas before a match, or even having a banana smoothie after a match. They're trying to have a quick form of energy, again, before and after their training session. Slow carbohydrates, on the other hand, those are harder for our body to digest. They take a longer time to be converted into energy. And generally speaking, we don't want to have those too close to training. So slow carbohydrates are going to be things like beans, whole grains, rice, things like that. Although they are more nutrient dense, they're going to be harder for our body to digest, and we're going to need to spend time and energy digesting that food. When we're going into training, we want all of our energy to be put into that training. So we don't want to expend energy digesting food, which is why those slower carbohydrates, although a very important part of our diet, should be limited within the hour before training and within the hour after training as well. So again, choose whole carbohydrates more often outside of those training hours, and choose the quicker carbohydrates, more often during training. Okay, so a few of these pre-training snack ideas that you would be able to have, they're going to be quicker in those they're going to be higher in those quick carbohydrates, and they're not going to have as many of those slow carbohydrates. So some examples could be banana over toast with a little bit of honey and cinnamon. When you are choosing the toast, in this case, don't choose a ridiculous high fiber one. A regular whole wheat is fine. A small bowl of fruit with some cottage cheese or a Greek yogurt and honey. Try not to choose really high fat forms of Greek yogurt and cottage cheese right before training. Again, fats are one of those ones that are harder for our body to digest. So if we have those right before training, we're going to be spending some time digesting that food rather than using that energy in our activity. So try to choose lower fat around the training time. Toast with ricotta cheese, honey, and strawberries would be another one. Any sort of fruit smoothie that's prepared with regular milk, again, not super high fat at this point. And then fruit skewers with a honey yogurt dip would be another idea there. So these are all things that you could have before training that are going to be higher in those quick carbohydrates. They're not going to take a long time for your body to digest, and you will have, that excess burst of energy to be able to use in your training or in your game. So what types of carbohydrates would you or your athletes or your children, what would they tend to eat? List out some of the most popular ones. I know there's me and my brothers would always have a lot of bananas before. That was our go-to one. Are there any other kind of pre-training snacks or higher carbohydrate snacks that you would eat? If there's no comments here, we'll kind of just move along. Peanut butter balls. So peanut butter balls are going to be high in fat. So peanut butter is a fat. And generally speaking, again, within that hour before training, we don't want to have too much fat. So that would be a great source of energy, maybe 2 hours before, where you need to, some extra fuel to make sure that you have enough energy for your whole match or your whole training session. Within that hour before, try to stick to things that are a little bit lower in fat. Again, fat just is going to slow down digestion. So we don't want to have that too close to our activity time period. All right. So next we're going to talk about fats. Again, not too close to training. So not within that 60-minute time period. A small amount isn't going to do much. So if you're having toast with banana and you want just a little bit of peanut butter for flavor on there, that's okay. But just try to avoid having a lot of fats within that 60-minute time period. Fats will provide sustained energy. So they're important to have throughout the day to provide your body with stored energy to use when you do run out of carbohydrates. It is an important part of a diet, especially for athletes where you tend to need a higher calorie intake. It's a lot easier to get calories from fats than it is from eating a bunch of salads, just because fats are more calorie dense, they're more energy dense. Choose mostly plant-based fats. So you can get fats from a variety of sources. You can get them from fatty meats, like beef or steak. You could also get them from cheese or from higher fat dairy products. Those are all fine and well to include in a diet, especially if we're trying to make something that's enjoyable and sustainable. But try to choose more plant-based fats than those animal-based fats. So those would be things like nuts, seeds, nut butters, coconut, avocado, olive oils, things like that. Those are going to provide our body with a source of fat that's a little bit healthier for our heart and for our body. In terms of portion size, again, outside of this training window, we're looking at about 1 to 2 thumb sizes per plate. This would be about 1 to 3 tablespoons of fat, depending on, your specific activity level, your height, your weight, all that stuff, your calorie needs. That'll vary, but about 1 to 3 tablespoons of fat per plate. Again, fat's going to help ensure enough calories for athletes. It's also important for hormone production and vitamin absorption. So especially when we're talking about growing athletes, when their hormones are changing, their hormones are developing, fat is an essential part of hormone production and making sure that those are being produced in a healthy manner. Fats are also important for vitamin absorption. So there are 4 vitamins that need fat in order to be absorbed. That's vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin E, and vitamin K. So in order for those vitamins to actually be utilized in our body, we need fat to do that. Okay, so it is important that fat is a part of our diet, just maybe not in that 1 hour before or after training. So adding fats to your meals, there's lots of ways to do it. So you could add flax seeds or chia seeds to your pancakes in the morning. My personal favorite is making my own homemade jam. So to do this, you're just using a cup of fruit and a tablespoon of chia seeds, essentially melting that down in a pot. I use frozen fruit, melting that down in a pot until it's a nice jam-like texture, and then putting it in the fridge. Those chia seeds they release a gel-like substance when they sit in a liquid, so they will make a jelly-like texture. Adding nut butters to sauces, so like a Thai peanut sauce or a tahini sauce is a really great way to add some fat. Enjoy other plant-based sauces, so guacamole, if you like pesto, tahini. And if you're feeling really adventurous, or if your athletes are feeling really adventurous, trying some avocado chocolate pudding, or as was mentioned earlier, those nut butter energy bites, great way to add in fats for snacks outside of training. Any fats that your athletes or your children like eating in particular? I think my brothers and I were all peanut butter fans, so peanut butter smoothies were really popular. Also avocado or guacamole, just as a topping for things, were really great as well. No ideas on this one? Nuts and peanut butter, for sure. They are a great snack, again, to have with you when you are training. Almonds, another great one. So when you are training, and this is something I'll mention in a second as well, you want to be what is called an anabolic state. So you need to be, in order to gain muscle or in order to build muscle mass, you need to be what's called an anabolic state, which means you need to be eating or consuming more calories than what you are expending in a day. And fats can be an easier way to help you reach those calorie goals or those energy goals, especially for athletes, and even more especially for young athletes who need a lot of calories in a day to maintain and replenish, the amount of energy they are expending in a day. All right, so we'll get into talking a bit about protein. So in terms of protein is another one that's hard for our bodies to digest. So not too much protein within 60 minutes prior to your training. Protein is great afterwards. Before, again, it really depends on how well you digest that protein. Some people, it won't bother them too much, others it will. Generally speaking, not going to have an entire chicken breast within 60 minutes before training. It's just not going to sit well. Proteins, as I say, they are harder for our body to digest. They take a while for us to break them down. So sticking to having those after your training is likely a better idea. Just within that 60-minute window, it really should just be water and quick digesting carbohydrates. Prioritize protein after training. Just out of curiosity, in the comments on the Zoom chat, type in how much protein you think you need after training in grams. A random, just throw out a ballpark. Any guesses? We have 30 grams. Okay, any other guesses here? $40 isn't, it's pretty close. So essentially after training, we're looking for between 20 and 30. It does depend on your sex, so whether you're female or male. It also does depend on your training volume and your total, energy needs throughout the day. But generally speaking, 20 to 30 grams is a great ballpark. And it's quite interesting. So in terms of how much protein you eat at once, it's better to eat protein consistently throughout the day rather than having a lot at one time. The reason for this is that most people, on average, we can digest 10 grams of protein per hour. So if you think about it, we eat probably every 3 hours, most of us. So that 30 grams could be digested over 3 hours on average. If we're eating, so some protein powders are, 40 grams, some are even up to 50 grams of protein. If we don't digest that, we're just going to excrete it. We're not going to be able to use all of it. So instead, it's often recommended to have smaller amounts of protein evenly spaced throughout the day. So making sure you're having 20 to 30 grams of protein at each meal, 20 to 30 grams of protein after your training, and then a little bit, in your other snacks throughout the day. But it's better, again, to have smaller intakes of protein throughout the day than having a huge portion of protein at once. So the recommendation for the average person is 0.7 grams per pound per day. For athletes, this can go up to 1.2 grams per pound per day. So we're ranging, again, males will need a little bit more protein. We're ranging from about 0.8 grams to 1.2 for athletes. The average person is going to be at about 0.7 grams per pound of body weight every day. Again, whatever that number is for you, evenly spacing it throughout the day is likely going to yield better results for you in terms of how much you can actually use. So again, aim for 20 to 30 grams per meal. Protein are the building blocks for muscle. So how muscular growth happens is when you stress your muscles. When you put stress on your muscles, there are actually micro tears, really small tears that are formed in your muscle. So imagine if this is your muscle, you get a little micro tear. Okay. When you get this micro tear, you need two things. You need protein building blocks to rebuild this muscle. You also need quick energy to be able to actually do that process of rebuilding the muscle. Okay. So to basically make sure your body is functioning while you're rebuilding this muscle. Those two things are going to be carbohydrates to give your body energy to do everything else it needs to do, and protein to actually help fill that gap and rebuild that muscle. That's why after training, it's important to have quick carbohydrates and protein, because those are the two things that you need to repair that literally damaged muscle tissue. It has been damaged, it's torn, and it needs to be repaired. That's how muscular growth happens. Now, instead of like this, you have this, and it's going to be filled. So your muscle has grown. And over time, again, that's very micro tears. Over time, that does build muscle to a point where it is visible in muscular growth, and of course, helps build strength as well. Protein will also support the immune system. So for people, for young athletes who are growing, not only is it important to help facilitate the process of growing and building their muscles and their structure, it's also going to support their immune system in terms of not getting sick as often and making sure that they're staying healthy. So a couple post-training snacks. So you could have a banana with cinnamon and cottage cheese. That was my go-to snack. Some people don't love the taste of cottage cheese. If you don't, you can do the exact same thing with Greek yogurt and a bit of honey. A whole grain chicken wrap, or even deli meat wraps. So wraps that are made with deli meat, and maybe a side of fruit for your carbohydrates. Greek yogurt and fruit smoothie popsicles, or just a regular Greek yogurt and fruit smoothie. If you do like using protein powders, the protein powder that is the most digestible for humans is whey. So whey and soy are the ones that humans tend to digest and use the best. Casein is another one that is digested pretty well. So if you are using protein powders, I do recommend sticking with whey, casein, or soy, and making sure that you're checking with a doctor or a healthcare professional always before you are starting a supplement. Protein powders are a supplement, and there can be interactions there with other medications you may be taking. So really making sure that if you are starting a protein powder, you are talking to your doctor about it, or your athletes are talking to their doctor about it. You could also have Greek yogurt dip with some starchy vegetables. So for your vegetables here, you'd want ones that are higher in carbohydrates, things like sweet potatoes, corn, beets, green peas, parsnips, all that good stuff. And then edamame. So edamame is a soybean. It is high in both carbohydrates and protein. So it can be a good, quick and easy snack after a workout. Keep in mind, these are higher in fiber, so they do take a bit longer to digest. I wouldn't say they're the most ideal post-training snack, but they are super convenient if you're getting roasted edamame and you're on the road. It's something really easy to eat on the go. And then the last one here would be energy bites. So these would be small balls that are made of dates, protein powder, and a sweetener, so like honey, so that you could have that after your training as well, or a homemade granola bar, things like that. If you are familiar with RX bars, those are also not a bad post-training snack either. They are a little bit high in fat, but again, as something that is just quick and easy to grab, RX bars do have a good amount of protein and carbohydrates, so those could be used after your training as well. Okay, any favorite proteins? Chicken, beef, fish, eggs. Actually, eggs are not, they are a good source of protein. But they are not a great source in terms of the quantity of protein that you get from eggs. So eggs are kind of a half fat, half protein. But do we have any favorite proteins here? If not, I will move on. Okay. Are there any questions right now as we get to kind of halfway through this session about protein, fat, or carbohydrates? You can list them here or in the Zoom chat.
Hi, Kenzie. If you can kindly explain carbohydrates a little bit again, the fast and the slow carbohydrates.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. So they're fast carbohydrates and slow carbohydrates. The main difference is going to be the fiber content. So quick carbohydrates are going to be low in fiber. Slow carbohydrates are going to be a little bit higher in fiber. When we eat fiber, fiber is something that is not digested in our body. We cannot physically digest it. So it slows down our rate of digestion. So if we eat a teaspoon of sugar, we're going to get energy really fast. There's not much fiber, there's no fiber in pure sugar. And it's one that is really easy for our body to digest and use right away. It's essentially going into our body and then we're using it as energy. Slow carbohydrates, on the other hand, those are higher in fiber. So those take a longer time for us to digest because it contains, those foods contain particles in it that we can't actually digest. So our body's trying to digest them, not working. And so it takes a longer time for us to actually access the energy, the sugars, and use them as energy. So quick carbohydrates are going to be things like fruit, sugar, honey, maple syrup, refined carbohydrates. So crackers, white rice, breads, things like that. They're all easy for our body to digest. We get energy really fast. Slow carbohydrates are going to be things that are higher in fiber. So beans, brown rice, quinoa, whole grains, vegetables, things like that. They're harder for our body to digest. They take a longer time for us to digest. And therefore, we're spending more time and energy with digestion, and we're not getting that energy as quickly. So imagine if you've ever had beans right before going to training, your stomach probably didn't feel the best. That's because our energy is now being put in two places. We're trying to run and we're trying to digest food, and it doesn't work because we don't have enough energy to do either thing. Does that make a little bit of sense? Is that a little bit more clear?
Yes, thank you. Thank you. And also, many trainers, they would say like 150 gram protein, like a chicken breast or some kind of fish or anything like that with one meal, and then the other meal has the same kind of protein. What do you think about that?
So, sorry, I'm not sure I'm understanding. So if one protein...
So trainers usually they tell you that you have like a main meal, lunch or dinner, right? So the lunch they always tell you to use 150 gram of protein and some rice and some vegetables, and then they tell you in the evening for dinner they also say the same thing: 150 gram protein and then 100 gram rice and then 200 gram vegetables. So what do you think about that kind of like portions?
Yeah, so those portions would be grams of the whole food. So in terms of when they're saying 150 grams of chicken, they're saying 150 grams of that weight of chicken, which would really only be about 30 grams of protein.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be 30 grams of protein like that. Okay, because I was confused about, like you said, per LBS for athletes, it's going to be certain, like, I don't know, you said 1 gram of protein per LBS, right, for athlete?
Yeah, about 1 gram of protein per gram of per pound, sorry, of body weight. So 1
Okay.
gram of protein per pound of body weight on a daily basis. So if someone was 100 pounds for ease, they would be eating 100 grams of protein per day.
Right. So 150 gram of chicken breast would be like 30 grams almost. Protein,
Roughly.
I guess. Okay, good to know. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Any other questions about protein, fat, or carbohydrates before we move on? All set. If things pop up, there's also a chance at the end to ask your questions. Okay, so now we'll talk about micronutrients. So there's a couple micronutrients that I'm going to talk about here. These are particularly important for young athletes. That is not to say that they're not important for older athletes. They're important for everybody, but particularly in growth and development, these ones are important. So calcium and vitamin D is essential for bone growth. Vitamin A is going to be important for eyesight and immune system. Magnesium is going to be important to regulate our heart function and our heartbeat, as well as our immune system and bone growth and development. And then potassium and sodium balance. So people may say you need your electrolytes. When they're saying electrolytes, primarily they're talking about sodium, potassium, and magnesium. Those are things that are going to help balance your fluid in your body, maintain a healthy blood pressure, and help your heart beat function as it should in a normal manner. Okay. So for athletes, we're really looking at magnesium, potassium, and sodium to make sure that your heart is functioning properly while you are exercising and putting your heart in more demand. And then calcium and vitamin D, again, important for bone growth. Vitamin A, I have included here primarily because it is one that is often under-consumed, and it's really important for our immune system and vision as well. Okay, so where do you find these? Calcium is primarily found in dairy products as well as soy products, so tofu, edamame, tempeh, and then any fish with bones. So sardines and salmon are good examples. Vitamin D, we can't really get from food. The only foods that have vitamin D in them are salmon with bones and mushrooms that are grown in a very specific way using UV light, which are hard to find. So vitamin D can be found in some dairy products because the food manufacturer has fortified or added the vitamin D. Otherwise, you can really only get it from direct exposure to sunlight, which is recommended at 15 minutes of direct exposure to sunlight per day for vitamin D. In Canada, we have winter, so we don't get a lot of sun. And that is why vitamin D supplementation is common in Canada. As always, before starting any supplement, it is very important to talk to a doctor. However, that is a common supplement that is used. Magnesium, you're going to find this in whole grains, leafy greens, and beans or legumes. And potassium is going to be found in a lot of types of fruits. So some examples, banana and cantaloupe, also in potatoes, both white potatoes and sweet potatoes. All right, so how do you throw this all together when you are building your plate? The number one thing that I like to mention first is always try your best to opt for minimally processed foods. The less processed a food is, the more likely it is to contain more nutritional value. Focus on 3 to 4 colors per meal. This is going to help you get all of the vitamins and minerals you need in a day. Okay, the more colors that you have, the more variety of vitamins and minerals that you're consuming. So having a colorful plate can not only be pretty, but also provide you with better nutritional value. Aim for a half of a plate of fruits and vegetables, and then fill the remaining half with your whole grains and protein. Again, this is when you're building a plate outside of training. So we already talked about before training, your simple, quick carbohydrates. After training, your simple, quick carbohydrates paired with protein. For every meal outside of that, we're going with fruits, vegetables, and on half of the plate, and then the other half, we're going for whole grains and protein. And of course, we are topping that off with our fat to make sure that we're getting enough calories, to add flavor, and to help with certain vitamin and mineral absorption. Okay, so when we are building any plate outside of our main meal, outside of our training kind of time block, we are looking for half a plate whole grains and protein, half a plate fruits and vegetables, fat on top. So Maria, when you had spoken about the rice, chicken, and broccoli, you are having the rice and chicken, I guess, making up about 50% of your meal, and then the broccoli would be making up that other 50%. You would also need some sort of fat, maybe a dressing on your broccoli, maybe a little bit of olive oil, sauce on your chicken, maybe some avocado, something like that. Okay. All right, a couple of tricks to help with athletes who may be struggling to eat nutritiously. One thing that is common among athletes is eating convenient foods. An athlete's schedule is crazy, it's hectic, especially if we're a young athlete and we're going from school to training, or if we're an older athlete and we're going from work to training. It can be very difficult to make foods from scratch. So it is common to have convenient foods that tend to be a little bit more refined. So for example, when you are trying to make the transition from eating processed foods to less processed foods, I always recommend that it is a gradual transition. So for example, say someone was having Fruit Loops for breakfast, and you wanted to help them make nutrition changes. I don't usually recommend completely eliminating the Fruit Loops right off the bat and encouraging Greek yogurt with fruit. It's probably not going to be super well received. So instead, I would recommend first by just decreasing the amount of those Fruit Loops and maybe adding some fresh fruit to that cereal. So now they're having a bowl of milk, Fruit Loops, and a bit of fruit in there as well. The next step would be subbing the milk for Greek yogurt. So now they're having Greek yogurt, which is higher in protein, and they're topping it with fruit and some Fruit Loops for a crunch. Then you continue the progression with more fruit, less Fruit Loops, maybe a bit of honey for some sweetness, maybe a bit of peanut butter for some flavor. And so over time, you're reducing the amount of Fruit Loops that they're having, and you're turning it into a healthier breakfast parfait. That seems to be a lot more beneficial. It's a more positive approach to eating, and it's likely going to yield better results than just completely eliminating one food and replacing it with another. You can always sneak vegetables into sauces. So if you are trying to find creative ways to get more vegetable consumption, things like broccoli pestos, a sweet potato sauce, a roasted red pepper tomato sauce, those can all be simple and easy ways to increase vegetable consumption without just serving boiled broccoli, which probably isn't going to be super enjoyable for a young child or even for an older adult. Okay, so being a little bit creative in the ways in which you incorporate vegetables. Opt for homemade treats instead of store-bought. So things like cookies, brownies, even if you're making them at home with sugar, that is a better option than buying the store-bought version. So if you can make your treats at home, bonus if you're willing to experiment with things like black bean brownies. There's also things such as chickpea cookies, which sound weird but are super tasty, and that can help just increase the nutritional density of your day of meals. Use strategic kitchen organization. By this, I mean try to have the higher processed foods less accessible. So keeping them at the back of cupboards, harder to get to, harder to reach, not in plain sight, and keeping those healthy foods, the whole foods, easier to access and easier for you to reach and get. Creating a positive eating environment. So this is especially important for athletes. I myself, as a female athlete, I did suffer from a case of anorexia. And I think it's really important as we are training our young athletes to establish a positive, healthy, and happy relationship with food. A couple ways that you can do this is encourage eating together. It may be hard as a coach to do this, but trying to encourage your students or your athletes' families to eat together can be good. Or even if you are training a group of athletes and it's going, you're doing a camp and it's going through the day, encourage eating together at lunchtime. Encouraging cooking at least once per week. So if you have children and you can try to get them involved in cooking, even if it's just mixing something on the side or helping pick out what meals they'd like to have, that can be a huge impact on their relationship with food. Avoiding comments on weight and or amount of food eaten. Young athletes need to eat a lot of food. Not only are they growing, so they need more food, than they expend on a daily basis because they're actually growing every day. They are also expending extra energy while they're on the court. So some athletes need up to 5,000 calories per day. It can be a lot. It can be a lot of food, and it is what they need. Okay, so ensuring that there's not comments that are going out about weight or about the food eaten. And lastly, reiterating the benefits of nutrient-dense food on performance outcomes. So, reiterating that having, Greek yogurt, banana, and honey after, your training session can help build muscle, can help you get stronger, can help you get the ball that is, get that sick drop shot that someone just made. Anything like that, really trying to encourage that what you're doing in terms of nutrition can help you on the court, can help you become a better athlete, can help you hit better balls, get to more shots, things like that. Making that connection and reiterating that connection can build a healthy relationship with food. It can also increase motivation to eat those healthier foods. All right, so that is the last little bits of session number 1. I am opening the floor now for the last 10 minutes here for questions from the audience. So if you do have questions, you can either submit them on the group chat or in Menti, and I will do my best to get to them all.
Thanks, Kenzie, for a fabulous presentation. And as Kenzie said, we're opening the floor for questions. So again, if you have questions, please put them in the chat or Menti, or, if you want to unmute and ask Kenzie directly, that would be fantastic. So please go ahead and ask Kenzie as many questions as you like.
Hi, Kenzie, again. So what kind of electrolytes, like there are drinks available and during the matches that we can use, which one you recommend that are best for performance?
Yeah, that's a great question. So electrolytes during performance, generally speaking, things like Gatorade, Powerade are not necessarily recommended unless you're going for longer than 90 minutes at a time. Okay. The reason for that, they are quite high in sugar as well as food colorings that aren't necessarily the most nutritious. And if you're not going beyond the 90-minute time period, your body likely doesn't need that many electrolytes to replace unless you are sweating excessively. That's where we lose most of our electrolytes. Certain electrolyte packets that, in terms of what you're looking for, is you're looking for magnesium, sodium, potassium, and limited added sugars. So limited added sugars, limited food colorings, and really making sure you're getting those specific minerals in. I always recommend real food options. So having a banana for your potassium afterwards with a little bit of salt. So salted banana chips even, or a little bit of salted peanut butter on banana, something like that is going to help you replenish your electrolytes. Or again, if you are having that packet, whatever packet you are using, trying to choose one that, again, doesn't have too many added sugars and doesn't have too many added food colorings either. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, someone also told me if you have a coconut water with salt, something like this, and some lime you can mix. It can really affect, like it can be a really good drink for electrolytes.
Yeah, so different homemade electrolyte drinks, even honey with a bit of salt in water can be one as well. Really, you're just making sure that you're getting those minerals in. And although I say in other electrolyte packets, you know, be wary of the sugar, you do need some sugar. So, you know, from the honey that would provide a little bit of sugar. So those homemade ones can also be great. Those are also likely better just because they're less processed as well. So they wouldn't contain too many added chemicals in them. Again, the issue with more of those Gatorade and Powerade is that they contain excess sugars and those colorings that we don't necessarily need. So still making sure that you're getting a little bit of sugar in there, magnesium, sodium, potassium.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, how would you approach talking about nutrition to a group of juniors? Yeah, that's a great question. So one thing I like to do when I am actually approaching a group of young athletes is to ask them one day to bring one of their favorite snacks or bring their favorite lunch or even just share their favorite lunch with the group. And really talk to them about different components of food in a way that connects the food with what it does in their body. So I find for young people, whether they be athletes or not, it's really important to make that connection so it's something that they visualize. For example, if you just say to an athlete, you need protein, it's probably not going to mean much to them. If you say to them, you know, if you want to hit a harder forehand, or if you want to get to that ball faster, here's some things that can help you. So the cottage cheese, which is protein, the cottage cheese can help you hit the ball a little bit harder. The banana is going to help you run faster. So really making that connection, walking through what does a healthy meal look like and what those components of food are actually doing for their body. Hopefully that helps a little bit.
I have one more question, Kenzie. So some athletes, like I always had a problem with weight gain, and even no matter how much I train hard, if I reduce my food and I started feeling a lot of injuries and stuff like that, but then, you know, I always couldn't figure it out, like how to maintain a good diet to keep the weight maintained or lose it. And develop lean muscles and yet prevent injuries. If you have something to say about that.
Yeah, so as you know, as an athlete, the most important thing is to make sure that you're refueling your body, to really make sure that you're giving your body enough calories to do what it needs to do. When we start restricting our food, our performance is likely going to fall with it. So number one is to make sure we're getting enough calories in. And then it's about looking at the quality of food. So really making sure you're getting as many whole foods as possible, increasing vegetable intake so that you can get all those vitamins and minerals, but also what vegetables are going to do is they're going to help you feel full for longer, so that maybe you're not tempted to eat as much later in the day, and being really honest about what kinds of foods that you're having throughout the day. So ensuring that you're having your whole grains, your fruits and vegetables, your protein and healthy fats. When you're doing that and you're pairing that with exercise, the likelihood is you're going to get to the weight where your body likes to be at. Some of us are going to carry a little bit more fat. Some of us are going to carry a little bit less fat just based on our body type. So again, number one is making sure you're fueling your body with the nutrients that it needs. Number two is playing around with your specific meals to make sure you're getting enough whole foods and making sure that you're hitting all of those macronutrients, your carbohydrates, your proteins, your fats. Another thing to do is to experiment with the different, what we call ratios of macronutrients. So some people do better when they're eating a little bit more protein, a little bit less fat, a little bit less carbohydrates. Some people do better eating a little more fat, a little bit less protein, a little bit less carbohydrates. Again, some people do more with high carbohydrates and lower of the other two. So playing around with that can also help you in terms of finding the foods that are making you feel best. The best way to determine if foods are working well for you is your performance getting better? Are your energy levels high? Do you find that you're hungry all the time? If so, maybe something needs to change. Do you find that you're craving foods all the time? If so, maybe something needs to change. But you should feel high in energy, not hungry all the time, not craving, and your performance should be steadily getting better. If not, there may just need to be some experimentation that needs to go on.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Kenzie, can I ask a question?
Yes.
I have a young athlete, and this actually just happened this past weekend, where I understand the concepts of the pre and the post activity, but she's in a squash tournament and she had like 4 matches within a morning.
Yeah.
So it's just the way it had happened, the draw. So I understand the concept of pre, like an hour before and then after, but throughout 4 hours in the morning,
Yeah.
do you recommend if she needs a snack? Which I'm
yeah.
assuming she would, if you agree with that. Anyway, just like to know your thoughts on that.
Yeah, for sure. So absolutely we'll need a snack between that 4 hours. When we are ever talking about periods longer than 90 minutes, you will need more food in you. So if you're talking about whether you're talking about training or match play, if you're going for longer than 4 hours, you need more food. So in that specific case, I would start with, if possible, to eat 2 hours before the first match, having a full meal. So that means your fat, your protein, your carbohydrates, vegetables, and fruits. Having a full meal 2 hours before that first match. And then continuously eating both carbohydrates and protein throughout those other matches. Probably not too much fat, because that is one that tends to cause some digestive distress. So probably not too much peanut butter, nuts, seeds, things like that. But maybe after the first match, she's going to have a bit of lower fat chocolate milk for protein and sugars, and a banana. After the next match, maybe she's going to have a little bit of lower fat Greek yogurt and some fruit. So those smaller snacks that are easy to digest and a little bit higher in protein and carbohydrates. But it is important that she would eat between those matches if it's that long of a block. After that, it's important that she gets carbohydrates and protein right after her last match. And then about an hour later, eating a full meal, again, with the fats, the protein, the carbohydrates, the fruits and vegetables.
Thank you. Sorry, just to clarify what you said. So right after the last match, she has like her fat and her protein.
So
And
right
then
after so 2 hours before, a full meal.
Yeah.
And then between the matches, carbohydrates and proteins.
Yeah.
After the last match, and again, that carbohydrates and protein, and then about an hour after, having a full meal.
Right. So that would be like maybe an RX bar or something after the last one.
Yeah.
Or is that too high in fat?
No, that would be fine.
That would be fine. Okay.
Yeah. We're just talking like not, a fried steak.
Right.
It'll just be hard for her to digest because she's expended so much energy. And so then if you throw something else at her to digest that's hard to, she's probably not going to feel very well. So just giving a little bit of that buffer time and then having a full meal.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Kenzie, what about whey protein? What are the times if you can use it, the best times? And also if the supplements, like the timing of that.
Yeah. So nutrient timing is not nearly as important as total nutrition throughout the day. So regardless of when you have whey protein, it doesn't really matter. According to actual studies, as long as you have protein within 3 hours after your match, it's about the same as having it within the 20 minutes. So as long as you're having some source of good protein after your match, you're going to be all right. In terms of, using whey protein, you could use that really at any point of the day. I always recommend trying to have more natural sources of protein than supplements. they're just going to have more vitamins, more minerals, more nutritional value for you. But if you are using the protein powder just to reach your protein goals, then using that, at any time throughout the day can be beneficial. There's not really a specific time that's best for proteins. Again, after training, you do need protein, as long as that's within the 3-hour mark.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
One more question.
Okay.
So I have a lot of questions, sorry.
Great,
So-
keep them coming.
What do you think about coffee and tea, all those caffeine, the timing of using them, or whether we should use them or not, or like sometimes they dehydrate you, right? So,
Yeah, so as long as you're having enough fluid water, caffeine in small amounts is actually suspected to benefit exercise. Now, when I say small amounts, I mean like no more than 3 cups of coffee. And this is not Starbucks extra large coffees. This is 8-ounce servings of coffees. So, it's recommended not to exceed 3 servings of 8-ounce coffees, that caffeine content. When having that, I usually don't recommend anywhere 90 minutes before a game, just because with caffeine, you're probably going to have to urinate, and we don't want to have that really close to a game. So again, making sure that you are hydrating with water if you're having caffeine, and then sticking to that, less than 3 8-ounce cups of coffee before a game. And generally speaking, I don't recommend any sort of caffeinated beverage in terms of like an energy drink that contains other chemicals in it, something that's more natural. The other thing to note with caffeine is it does interact with many other medications that you may be taking, or other supplements that you may be taking. So if that is something that you're doing, making sure to talk to a doctor about that as well.
right. So I also I heard if you take coffee with after a meal or before a meal, it really ruins all the nutrients in the food. Do you really think that's true, or it's just?
To be honest, I've never heard that before, and I don't think that would be true. In terms of caffeine's ability to inhibit nutritional value, the only thing I could see, and again, I'm not 100% sure this answer for you, the only thing I could see is it may inhibit certain vitamin and mineral absorption. The degree to that, I would doubt would be very significant. So I don't think having coffee with any meal would significantly decrease nutritional value.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Great. Thanks, everybody, for your really great questions and engaging discussion. I think in the interest of time, we're going to wrap things up here, knowing that Kenzie will be back for part 2, which is essentially all gains and no pains of performance nutrition on November 2nd. And then she'll be back for part 3 on November 30th for pre-game time of performance nutrition. And so if you have questions, please write them down. Please register for those 2 sessions and take part in the part 2 and part 3 of these webinars. And while I'm just referencing the webinars, I will also mention we do have another webinar scheduled for October 19th. That's on safe sport and complaints and what you really need to know. Safe sport has been very huge in the news these days with things with hockey, gymnastics, etc. And it's a really important topic for not just administrators, but coaches, officials, etc. And so I encourage you to register for that webinar as well. All of the links are available in Club Locker and on our website. So with that being said, Kenzie, thank you so much for your great presentation today. It was very informative and valuable. And we look forward to part 2 and part 3 with you in November. Otherwise, thank you everybody for attending, and we'll look forward to seeing you on one of our future webinars.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, and we'll see you soon. And yes, Jeff, thank you for mentioning the other course. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just gonna pop my email really quickly in the comments if anybody does have any follow-up questions. That way you can reach me between now and the next session. If you do have any, again, follow-up questions or would like to get on a private call or anything like that as well, that can all be set up through my email. And thank you so much for everybody for attending. And I look forward to seeing you again next time. And thank you, Jeff, again for having me today.